Oof. All right. Let's do this, guys. Go to debate stream. We're going to review the forum thread that we're going to be talking about for the most part. And then I asked if any Smashmans wanted to debate. Anchor dodged. A lot of other people dodged. It seems like TammonIsHot wants to. A lot of people might not agree with TammonIsHot's views per se. But I mean, you got to give it to him. At least he's not dodging, right? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of other people who would want to talk to me. However, a lot of them aren't in my Discord or anything like that, so it's hard to reach out to them. Hopefully, hopefully we can have some fun here. Hopefully we can maybe explain some points of views. Maybe we can actually find some disagreement. It seems like yesterday when I was talking to Lontano, Hyplex, and them, they said there's disagreement. They brought up something they disagreed with, and what they disagreed with wasn't actually, it didn't have anything to do with my point. And so I just kept pushing, pushing, pushing. It seems like they never actually disagree on anything. And so everything they say they disagree with, it was just not what I was trying to say at all, and it was nowhere near it. And so I feel like maybe that's something that happened, and maybe we can move into something that is a little bit more manageable, where we can all agree that we agree, if that makes sense. All right, we're gonna go here, copy. All right. Whew. Fuck, I messed up the stream title. I'm so dumb. Oh no. Meshiro's Pros. Save. Oh god. Can I? Okay, there we go. Alright, Tammon, I dragged you in, but I'm gonna review the um, Hypixel forum post first. I'm gonna go through all that. Is that okay, Tammon?
Yeah, I'm watching your stream right now.
Okay, I'm also gonna turn down your little ad. Well, I think it's one of the first times we talk, and I think it's gonna be interesting to maybe review both mine and your messages specifically, because you're one of the few people who actually replied to my message. So we'll see.
I think all I did was just be toxic, though. I don't think I actually
Yeah,
gave
a
any
lot of
really
people
constructive
were
feedback.
toxic. A lot of people just didn't even read my post. They saw the other people responding and they just piled on. It's funny though. We'll see. We'll see. Um,
Well, I read the post, so I guess that's something.
yeah, if you
Eh,
if you read the post and you read my message, it's hardly more than a lot of other people. It
It's
seems.
my brother in the background.
That's all good. Don't worry about it. All right. So this is the. Actually, let me open up Stream Chat
Eh,
real quick. I don't know if you want to mute. I'm just going to be reading the forum thread. All right. Hey Alex. Hey Caps. I see you guys. All right. This is a thread that there's a lot of controversy about. Recently, or I say recently, this was over a month ago, there was an HPC balance patch proposal made by Alan Mario One. He's a HPC member. HPC is the Hypixel Player Council. Every so often, they choose a game and they try to figure out some good balance changes that could be done, or ideas for a new update or anything like this. Essentially, just to keep games a little fresher and try and improve them a little bit at the very least. And then they make a post, they get a bunch of feedback, and then they usually eventually try and roll these out. There have been some posts that never really led to an update, or some posts that led to a much smaller update than what people expected when they read the post, because the post was not necessarily like it was ideal, but it wasn't like achievable necessarily, because a lot of the HPC who are working on these don't necessarily know what's possible and what isn't. And so they just kind of think of what sounds reasonable and they put it out there. That's not always the case. It was actually Chad been called him before. He's a really nice dude. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame the HPC here. I feel like the HPC could have done a little bit more work, but for what their average is, like what they normally do, I think it's fine. I think they could upgrade what they're doing, but we'll go into that in a little bit. So basically, here I'm gonna go through these real quick. A lot of all the debate here isn't actually going to be about the individual changes, but we'll read through them real quick just so you have an idea. So there's a bunch of heroes when you play Smash Heroes. A lot of them are named. General changes. All characters that have energy mechanics spawn with 100. This was a bit of a hot take because Void Crawler was spawned with 100 Void energy, which is a little OP because if you include that with invincibility, it's very, very good damage right off spawn. You can very easily surprise someone with a very large amount of HP loss. And then any secondary which requires charges is fully charged upon respawn. This would be pretty cool for Kara. As Kara's secondary, you spawn with a Kami, that'd be pretty nice. Some people are reading this and they're like, oh shit, Shoop spawns with a 5 charge, which would be pretty disgusting. But if I remember correctly, someone clarified that that's not actually what they meant, and that maybe that wouldn't be including Shoop, he would spawn with like a 1 charge or something. Anyways, let's get into the hero specific changes. Hey, Elsif. We've got bulk, so they want to fix. Well, at one point they want to fix. They mentioned they want to fix bulk car because right now bulk car is broken, and they want to increase the aerial hitbox by 1. So while the car's in the air, the hitbox is larger. This would make it easier to get air shots, and then some charge cooldown slightly lower, and bulk slam will do slightly more damage. And then there's a few more. I'm really just going to highlight, I think, the 3 that I use as an example in my post. So the 3 that I really want to highlight. So Cluck. Cluck's main right click is your rocket. A large amount of Cluck's damage and kills and literally everything comes from the rocket. And they want to buff the rocket damage from 6 to 7. Now, I don't know if that's a good change. To me, it seems like this could be a good change. I don't know what competitively Cluck's at right now. I don't know I mean, I've seen a lot of Clucks play. Most of the Clucks you see play are people who just play because they have it unlocked at the start. I think it's very difficult to find like mid-level Clucks. Most Clucks that I see are like Lightning or Swift when he plays his Cluck, stuff like this. Another one that I highlighted was Cake Monster's Regurgicake. So they want to change Regurgicake's cakes from giving 5% damage mint to 7% damage mint for 4 seconds. So before, if you hit all your Regurgicate cakes, you got 30% damage mint, and now you'd be getting 42% damage mint for 4 seconds. So it's an extra 12% damage mint for 4 seconds. So if over 4 seconds you would have taken like 100 damage, let's say, that's 12 less damage that you would be losing. So instead of only taking 70, you would be only taking, oh, so instead of taking a full 70 for the 100 damage with 30% mint, you would be only taking, what is that, 58? 58. So it's a decent amount of HP save. It's not too much, but I mean, a lot of balancing patches are just going to be little things like that. Arguably, I would estimate Collect's rocket damage buff to actually be more significant, but what do I know? And then what's another one I clarified? Or I didn't clarify, but I pointed out. Void Crawler. Void Crawler slash damage from 7 to 6. So I think is slash the melee? I don't think slash is the melee. I think slash is right click, right? On Void? I believe so. Something like that.
Yeah, that's the right click.
Yeah, the dash.
Yeah.
So essentially just want to change the dash damage from 7 to 6, which is a reasonable amount, I guess. I don't know. I'm not one to say which of these are necessarily good or bad changes. There's a lot of other things like changing Shoop's ultimate uh, to have 1 less damage per hit. Now, this is 1 less damage per hit, not overall. So I think, I don't know how many hits Shoop also does. It does something like 8 hits or something like that, right? 8 hits of 5 right now. I'm not too sure. It's like 8 hits of 5 right now or something like that. It should be 8 hits of 4. So you're missing on 8 damage from ult, which right now Shoop's ult is reasonably good. I would say it's one of the better ults out there, especially for KB. Shoop's kind of crazy for KB. But essentially, this post went through, and there was a video made by famous Smash Bros. Player Drika, Here's Mara weight, make it better, LMAO. Yeah, usually having higher weight makes your hero better. Yeah, so caps, this is, some heroes got buff, some heroes got nerf caps. Um, so if we look at Mara real quick, increase Mara weight, that's a buff. Energy for long jump reduced by 5 energy, that's also a buff. And they increase the vertical on it, so it's another buff. So Mara's getting a triple buff here. Now, how good these buffs are, that's very difficult to say because it's very, very, very difficult to estimate how much of a difference more vertical on the long jump will be. Same thing with the energy cost and increasing Mauer's weight. When they say increase Mauer's weight, do they mean by a full tier? How much is a tier? How many tiers are there of weight? A lot of people don't know how many tiers there are of weight, stuff like this. So when they say increase Mara's weight, it could be literally as low as like a 1% change, or as much as making it Cryomancer heavy, which would be a very big change, or even heavier than Cryomancer. They don't specify what they want to change it to. I think that's absurdly vague. They should have at least changed that a little bit. But also here, decrease Void Crawler's rate. How much do you want to decrease it? Is it going to be the new lightest weight character? Who knows? But outside of little things like that, I did mention, I think, in one of my messages that H3C was a little vague with some of these. But I read this and I made a message as the uh, dedicated or as the appointed Smashers detective. A lot of people call me that in the AP Discord. I wrote a few things here. I've got two main points. The first main point, okay, this is the first big message I wrote. First main point. A lot of people's opinions on heroes are severely weighed by which heroes they play and how good they were at them. So a lot of people here, if you're Cluck one trick, or if you're a Care one trick, or if you're a one trick for anything, your opinion is definitely going to be weighed according to this, right? I think this is very reasonable to agree with. I don't think any of this is crazy. Maybe they don't know yet, though, to be fair. Yeah, Caps, but I feel like if you're getting feedback, you'd want to get feedback on the actual changes, right? Because let's say they say we're increasing the weight, and people think that that means increasing it by 10%, and the actual change is increasing it by 80%. Well, that's not what the community were giving feedback on, right? That's not what the community were agreeing with. They'll ask him why would he know? Yeah. Um, so I don't think that this is crazy by any means. And then there's my second one, which I mean, it seems like some people might disagree. So let's see at the second one. Whoever thought these battle changes has clearly not looked into what happens in games. So let's look at which heroes you want to buff and then randomly picking a skill increasing by X%. It's a completely different thing to look at how those changes actually reflect in game. If your A's main damage source is 80% of the damage and their second damage source is 20%, buffing their second damage source from 5 to 7, just as an example, is a 40% increase, but only actually reflects about a 5.9% increase in overall damage. So the damage change is a 40% increase in damage, but it's actually about a 5.9% reflected change in their overall damage output. And maybe up to like 6.5% if we factor in, if we weigh in a little factors, like people might be more inclined to use an ability more if it does more damage. So let's say if they increase damage on like Kame 2, for example, right? People might be more inclined on using Kame 2, or sorry, Kara 2, just Kame though, more often because it does more damage, just more significant. Little things like that that are very difficult to estimate, where player experience probably comes in a decent amount. Um, Anyways, and then I gave some examples on how to grab data. And some people had some hot takes on this. So, Stoli, famous player. Any code this stream? Probably not, Alex. Where it's a debate stream. As in, what would be the benefit? Yeah. Well, what would be the benefit of increasing weight? Usually, increasing weight is a buff. Decreasing weight is a nerf. Usually you want to have heavier heroes because heavier heroes just respond better to KB. And I think it's very, very, very rare that you'll benefit from having a lower weight. And I think a lot of the situations are uh, rare to the point that it's like it's situational and it's not like if you decrease the weight overall, I don't think people are gonna think that it's a buff by any means. Anyways, Stoli, famous player, says you probably have no experience in the comp scene. I don't know why you're trying to say most of these suck. Which, I mean, I wrote a bit of a post. This is the big hot take. You'll see a lot of people disagree with this. This is the main contention post that some people disagree with. So let's get into it. So I saw what Stoli said, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make a bit of an effort post here. You guys can answer it however you want. You'll see there's a lot of people answered this post. We'll go into it. I said, look, man, might not have much experience in the cop scene, but at the very least have some basic understanding. That's what this can be summed up into, because I've played most heroes at least once, or at least a couple dozen games, and I've played against a lot of heroes, just about every hero. Both just in solo queue, and I've played with some friends, stuff like this. Reasonably good players, MS players, and I've gotten at least one MS, which I think at the very least gives me an idea of how some of the abilities work. Not necessarily how significant changes to them might be, but just that they will have a change, right? And then I said my main point is a lot of these suggestions are misleading based on people not understanding the impact statistically that these changes will have. It's super easy to sit back and guess how significant or negligible a buff or nerf might be. The fact is that we have the tools necessary in order to do a lot more in-depth statistics on how these raw number damage value changes will impact the game. And this gives a far better idea of how these changes will actually represent in game. You, just like everybody else on this thread, have not gone through and checked those. And I'm confident in this. So far, no one has challenged that, any of that, I don't think. And I mean, we looked earlier, 2 seconds ago, it seemed like some of their things regarding increasing decreasing weight were vague, were potentially misleading, or next to guaranteed to be misleading. There's no way that everybody guesses the same way in this, right? And then I was like, as the person who made the smash damage charts, I have access to a database with a lot of top players, which I took screenshots for their stats and stuff like this. And I have enough knowledge about the Apex API to actually go and get these stats. I'm saying that a lot of these can very easily be misleading. And so I was like, maybe I'm wrong. And so let's see if I'm wrong. And so I gave 3 examples to compare who is more in touch with what actually happens. Either someone who just purely goes based off um, like game experience, right? So what we're trying to measure here is like how significant any one given ability is, right? And who has more knowledge about this? The average person with just their game experience, including like pros and like I guess more or less pros, and I guess some people who just have played in at least one tourney or whatever, maybe even no tourneys. They maybe have one MS, they maybe have no MSs. Um, Compared to them with more knowledge or just potentially more information that we could get through data. So I give 3 examples. Cluck's rocket damage change from 6 to 7. How much percent final damage do you actually think this will add to Cluck on average? A lot of people don't know how much Cluck's rocket damage goes into it. It goes into every game they play. And I was like, fun fact, a lot of people don't know Cluck actually has the highest damage per kill ratio of every hero, which means that this change will have a higher impact than it would on a damage change for a hero like Shoop, which currently the Shoop, I think Shoop has the lowest or the second lowest average damage per kill, and it's actually under half life. So on average, including like casual games, mostly casual games, just a lot of people have contention with that. Most kills, you actually kill them through Void, so the Void ends up doing more damage than you are. I shoot. And then I did another one that's slightly different. Instead of being damage, it's another raw number change, but it's for damage mitigation. So for Cake, the damage changed from 5 to 7, right? In order to know how significant this change is, it'd probably be important to know how often cakes are actually hitting Regurgicake. If it turns out that cakes are really relying on Regurgicake, then it seems like this change will be pretty significant. And it seems like if they don't often rely on Regurgicake that much, and they're mainly using Regurgicake for the dash reset, something like this, then maybe this buff isn't as big as people think. And so I go into that, and then I did Void Crawler's Void slash damage from 7 to 6. How much percent final damage do you think this will be for Void Crawler on average? And I said just an example, in my database, I can take averages from directly from top 100 era. That means that for clock size, I'll calculate top 100 clocks. And a lot of people mentioned that you can't get stats for only this patch, but I just want to make it clear for anybody brings this up again, because like 8 people have brought it up. We can very easily separate the data that is from before the patch and after the patch. Not necessarily get all the data after the patch versus all the data before the patch, but we can say, hey, if we know that this was this person's stats like after the patch happened, and these are this person's stats now, and there's a change, then we know that that change happened during the patch. And I said, if you can't answer these with reasonable accuracy that prove they really do have a superior grasp on how these changes will impact the game as a whole, I'll fully walk back. If it turns out that having more data isn't actually helpful, then I guess more data isn't useful, and whatever, we just won't use the more data. We'll just go back to relying on people's subjective view of the game. So, I mean, if you really want to, feel free to. And I said, look, anybody can participate. Feel free to participate. In a couple of days, I'll post the results, and we'll see how good or how accurate each person is. And so far, it seems like two people actually participated in this, from what I checked. Hyplex, after a bit of arguing with him to do it, and someone from my Discord, Sharkloot. We'll go through. There's a lot of shit posting here. I'm gonna skip these shit posts. This guy just seems to be like, yeah, go fuck yourself. And this is actually a boosting alt that says you got 3 stock by 2 minus P5 Cura, which just never happened. This guy just some random shit posting boosting alt. Some people end up being in the top 100 people since many people quit before the recent changes. How many people end up being in the top 100 people? What do you mean, how many people end up being in the top 100 people? Have some mercy, X. No, everybody's point to this good. Exactly. And so that's why we're going to have this debate real quick. Because it seems like a lot of people disagree with me, but they don't actually disagree with what I'm saying. They just disagree with me because they don't like me or something like that. So it's super funky. Lontano wrote out this whole thing. He wanted me to respond to this, not in a forum post, but just like urgently, because I'm going to make a forum post in a few days from now. And so I already responded to all this. So I'm just going to skip over this. I responded to it in DMs, and it seems like he didn't have too much of an issue. Or at least when we hopped in a call for over an hour, it seems like all the issues he brought up weren't actually going against what I was saying, but just like specific things that could be an issue that were a non-issue, such as like, what if we only want to balance around competitive play? Well, look, we just only use the data from competitive play, problem solved. And there's a lot of like little, depending on what you want to balance around, we can make changes like this. And those changes are just depending on whatever you want to do. And so I just respond to that. And this is actually the guy who I'm going to be talking to today. This is TammonIsHot. This is what he said. So he responds to my post. He said, and he already mentioned that a lot of this is just him talking shit and not necessarily responding to the points. But he said, Simman, this is why even Smash Hero players don't like you. In the last major update, we, as in mostly just Joku, or Joko is what people call him, made balance changes under without diving super deep into the API, and most of the changes are actually kind of nice beside the hardcore spooler nerfs. And this can be done again. Stop trying to seek attention, stop trying to cause fights about everything, but most importantly, stop acting like it's possible to be an expert on Smash Heroes when all you do is unnecessarily call out boosters that honestly nobody cares about. Look at the numbers that nobody else cares besides you cares about, and you only have one match skin. This means that you lack experience with a wide variety of the heroes. Thanks. So very clearly, this entire post is just fishing for free ratio, right? Free positive. You got to build that positive right now. TammonIsHot isn't doing so hot when it comes to negative to positive ratio. So I don't know if this was just easy bait or what, but or not people or do not count people. You just get stats. Too many people don't oppose the opposing argument or suppose the opposition of their own arguments. Exactly, Elsif. And I'm not even opposing what they're saying. That's the thing. I think a lot of people read my thing and they just didn't understand. And they just got ass mad that someone wasn't agree with them immediately. And there's a few more shit posts. And here, this is Hyplex's main post. I'm going to mention this because Hyplex actually one of the people who actually tried to engage with the thread later, and he's one of the people who was in the call yesterday. If you guys don't know, I had a debate, 1v, however many, I guess some people came in, some people left, a few people talked. I'd say maybe 3, 4, 5 people talked for well over an hour, and it seems this was one of them, this Hyplex. He says, can't really take numbers as base since well over half these stats come from mindless non-grinding. For older players, the API data spans across multiple different patches, so the data is even 100% accurate towards the current patch. Respond to this really quickly. Exactly, Caps, yeah. I'm not necessarily picking out fights though. I don't think I mean, it may have seemed a little aggressive with what I said, but I don't think I'm picking up fights. I'm just pointing out that some people are maybe more subjective and less objective. They're thinking more about what they want and less what they think is better for the game. And I think part of that is due to their own thinking, their own ego, their own whatever. And part of that is just due to the HPC not accurately showing like how much a damage change of like 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 actually represents. Anyways, I'm going to respond to Iplex here. So he says, over half these stats come from mindless non-grinding. When I mention data here, I don't necessarily only mean API data, I mean any data. There's a lot of recorded tournament games that have happened on this patch. If I remember correctly, this patch is reasonably old, and people have said that there's tournaments at least once a month, from what it seems. And there's a lot of data that we can just gather from watching these games, analyzing these games, seeing how often hits are actually made. And so if you want to do that, that data is available. You can do that. So this is just not, this is not an opposition. It's an argument, but it's not an argument in opposition to anything I'm saying. And then he said, this is not even accurate for the current patch. Guess what? If we're looking at data from tournaments that happened on this current patch, then the data is accurate to the current patch. That's kind of how that works. And if we're looking at API data and we're splicing out the data from that we know is not from the current patch, if we can't guarantee it's from the current patch, then we just get rid of it. Then boom, done. It's not. See, it's a lot of arguments that aren't actually arguing with. They're not opposing anything I've said. They're just arguments that are like out there. I don't understand any of this. All of these are very easy problems to fix. And then he says, taking stats from the top 100 does 100% the top 100 players with top 100 players with top 100 coolest nons. Not coolest nons usually don't attempt to dodge, easily avoidable abilities. Once again, if you want to balance, so when I read this, when I see a balancing thread, right, there's two types of balancing threads that I've seen from HPC. There's the ones where they only talk to the really good players, the tournament players, and they don't bother making a form thread about it. And they just immediately go and they submit it. So they get a lot of feedback, not from a forum thread, but just from the community, the top players that they want to poll. They send that in and they get a patch. They did that for Bridge, okay? If you look at the most recent really big the Bridge update, a lot of that, the vast majority was purely not from a forum post, not from a proposal. A lot of it was just from the HPC working with players. And so they could have done that here, but instead HPC decided to do the second type of post. The second type of post they do is they just want to balance the game in entirety for everybody playing it. Which, if you think tournament games, professional games, really top level games like this, they're by far not the majority of games that are played. You can hop in most times of the day as long as it's not like nighttime EST, and you can queue games reasonably quick for solos and for 2v2s. And none of these games are going to be competitive games, I promise you. And so it's a little funky. But if you want to go purely, it seems like HPC really wants to pull and balance around all games that are played. And so I was using top 100. Top 100 is top players, not top players. It's everybody. You have to ask with the Google Doc first. Yeah, they always go to top players with Google Doc. But then Hyplex, notice that we're reading a forum thread that they posted to get the entire community's feedback on it. Yeah, they always go to people first. What? They always go to top players first, and then they either don't make a forum thread to continue and get everybody's opinions, or they do make a forum thread and get everybody's opinions. And it seems like right now we're reading the comment on a forum thread that they posted. So I don't know. It seems like maybe they do want to get everybody's opinion. But hey, if you want to respond to this and you're only talking about top players, then you can look at the data that only is regarding those top players. I'm not the one to decide what you want to balance around. You can make that choice for yourself, man. I think everybody can make that choice for themselves. And then if we move on, J Cubed here. J Cubed, very famous 2 double MS player. So Caps, yeah, you're definitely picking fights from what I've seen. Well, I was picking fights after the fact, not in the forum post. But everything you said seems to be correct from outside. It doesn't have too much experience in Smash Comp. Yeah. And JCube just completely went in on me. But a lot of what he says is a little funky. Or none, even compared to me. I mean, I've played against some competitive players, which at the very least gives me some comp experience, right? Because it doesn't give me tournament experience, but it tells me like good players are better than me, right? That's at the very least some experience. So it isn't none, right? Just wrong. A kid thinks wins a tournament skill, someone needs to learn Smash Heroes, but I have several thousand wins. So I can very least understand most abilities work. I don't think any of what I said here is me saying that I'm really good at the game. I don't think this is what I said. I think you just misread this entirely. I never mentioned that wins determine skill, and I think that's very obvious if you look at. I think I've made that very obvious every time I've pointed out any AP hunter that has a lot of wins. I don't think any of them are good. I think if you play against any of them, you'll see that none of them are good. They all suck ass. For the most part, I guess maybe someday one of them will prove me wrong. And then you can just keep going. You guys can open up this forum thread if you want. It's on my Discord announcements. You can go through all this if you want. Every single fucking fight is different. And he got really mad at that. And then also, man, if there's even more 10 people in the history of Smash are actually a quality of cluck, I would be stunned. So now this actually unironically brings up a point, not in his argument, but a completely different argument that you could make, which is low sample size for comp play. And I actually brought this up a little bit. And so it seems like if you only want to balance around comp play, you can't just say this kit needs a buff or this kit needs a nerf uh, based on how often they're played. You can't just say Shoop needs a nerf because he is too commonly played now. Or you can't just say Green Hood or Pug or any of these kits individually deserve a nerf or a buff because of how often they're played. Because people play kits not only for how good they are, but also how much they like them, right? If people purely played based on matchup, a lot of people would be playing the same like 2 or 3 kits, and that sort of is the case, but not nearly as much as we would say if people were purely basing their judgment for what they play based on how good it performs in tournaments. You'd see a lot more of top kits, and you would essentially like Viget would just not be playing Xanic. It sounds like you want them to use your work to consider balancing from a different perspective, which is fine, but you're going it the wrong way, trying to insert yourself into the discussion, acting like your numbers are common knowledge. I'm not saying my numbers are common knowledge. I'm saying that given that data is possible to use, we probably should use it before to make a more informed decision. Especially if you looked earlier, Tammon said that they made an update using Joku's thoughts. Some were good, some were a little bad, like the nerfs of Spooter, right? It seems like it seems like we can make a decent update, a decent balance patch, no matter what. However, it also seems like a lot of the community can agree that the previous balance patch could have been better. Arguably, if we included that, it could have been at least a little bit better. And on top of that, they also agree that balance patches are very few and far in between. Okay, they're not common. You don't get one of these every week, every month. And so we should try and make this next patch as good as possible because we don't know when the next one's coming around. So if anything, it's an argument in favor of my argument, and it backs what I'm trying to say. Or that the amount of impact should be illustrated better. Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say, Blockhead Steve. And so Hyplex actually went in after a bit of discussion, and he actually went in and guessed 60%, 6 times per game, blah blah blah. And I'll go over this in a little bit. And then Sharkly from the Discord, and there's a few other things I didn't really. I don't think I read this one yet, but it seems like another in-depth post. Now I have here a quick thing I want to mention before we have the debate with Tammon. Here it is. One sec, I gotta find it. Notepad. I've got a notepad open, boys. I wrote down some stats. So before I read it, I'll tell you this. I asked people if they think that, and by I mean people, I mean top players, or whoever was really in the Discord, but a lot of them happen to be top players, either stats-wise or gameplay-wise as well. Whether or not they think that more data, more information would help them have a better understanding of the significance of different abilities and stuff like this. And it seems like some of them disagreed. And so I ran a very quick test. I played a game against someone who they, for the most part, reasonably agree that it's a decent representation of a good player. Someone who would be able to understand the abilities, right? Conrad is a reasonably good player. You can search up his stats. Played a game versus his Spooter, and he estimated that the web ability during that game contributed roughly 25% to his win, right? 25% significance in that. That his dash ability on speed was about 60% of it, and that his ult was about 15%. And then I asked him a few more questions, and then he said some things. I paraphrased it, repeated it back to him to make sure that I wasn't misinterpreting him. And he said, yes, I agree with exactly that. So those are 2 points that he agreed with. He agreed that he thinks that you could have gotten more information from watching a playback of that same game. So if he went, he analyzed the playback, or he got more data on that game, he could have gotten more information, right? So it's possible to get more information from a lot of these games, or at the very least some of these games. And that, he agreed, his answers for this, right? How much significance he would assume each of these abilities would be for a hero, for this hero, Spooter, would change or would be more precise after having access to more information from watching it back. So it seems like just having player experience, you get a decent estimation, right? But using further information, you can get more precise or different ideas in your head on like how you would weigh everything. And so it seems like from the answers I've gotten, and from the quick test I ran, just one game against someone who I think a lot of people wouldn't disagree that they're a reasonable player, unless you want to say that Conrad's not nearly top tier enough. In which case, I invite literally anybody in the comp scene to run that back with me. And I promise you we'll get similar results, or you'll just be acting in bad faith and we'll still get the same results, whether or not your ego is like you get to maintain your ego through trying to disagree with something that you don't actually disagree with. Okay? So just I want to put that out. It seems like a lot of people think that it's either impossible to get more data or that having more data wouldn't help by any means. And so at the very least, one reasonably good player, I don't know Conrad's stats, I can open them up, agree that you can get more data. It's not too difficult to get more data, and it would change your answers. That said, right here in a call, I've got top player, or I wouldn't say, I can't say top player because some people at Hyplex might get mad at me for saying top. I'm going to say a very high amount of player experience player. TammonIsHot. TammonIsHot. Hello, hello. You can make your introduction. I'm just going to pull up your stats here
Hi.
so that people can see TammonIsHot. Can you see this on stream right now? I'm going to hide this. This is TammonIsHot. We're just going to give a quick look at his stats just so you can see he has some amount of player experience. He's a 1920 player, which is the highest level player you can get in Smash Heroes. He has MS'd every single kit. He has over 9k wins on Pug. Some of his stats are boosted, but we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about other things.
Only on Marauder.
Only on Mara, yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna go through chat. I'm gonna read chat. You guys can keep talking to each other in chat, but while we're debating, I'm gonna be focusing a lot more on the conversation between me and TammonIsHot, and you guys can add on whatever you want. I'm seeing a lot of people are saying if he can't properly present his argument, then he shouldn't be surprised when not a single top player agrees with him and his methodology. I don't think I've ever said that I mean, I've said that a lot of people are really stupid when it comes to this, but I don't think I'm surprised that there's some disagreement. I'm just surprised more that it's such strong disagreement, where even after clarifying my arguments, they still just keep disagreeing with like some phantom argument that doesn't exist. But I guess we'll go into that. Uh, yeah, Hyplex. I've also said in that same call that I will provide the numbers. I want to really push my point. What's going to happen is you gave your numbers, and if I give my numbers now, right, Hyplex, after you gave your estimations, and you're not close to the actual numbers, right? So if you don't actually have as significant or as accurate of an idea of what the numbers actually are, then someone else might immediately turn around and say, oh, well, I would have guessed the correct numbers. Fuck Hyplex, right? And I want to try and prevent that as much as possible. So I urge everybody watching this, if you have strong opinions or you know someone has strong opinions, tell them to go reply to the thread, right? and do the same thing that Hyplex did, do the same thing that Sharkloot did, and throw your numbers up to see how accurate, how much of a grasp do you actually have on just the damage values at the very least, right? Because abilities are more than just damage; they're also KB, they're also like spike potential, like spike kill potential, stuff like this. But just on the damage aspect, or just on the damage met, how much do you think these are actually going to be impacted through the suggested balance changes? That said, I'm here with Tammon, top player, as you can see. I'm going to go and I'm going to go back on the forum thread here, go to first page. I'm going to scroll down, I think, so we can reasonably see at least the cake and the clip changes. All right, hello, Tammon. Do you want to give yourself a quick introduction, or do you just want to leave it at saying hello?
I'd rather just leave it at saying hello because I'm probably one of the most active Smash Heroes players outside of the actual Smash Heroes community, so I think people already know who I am.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of people do know you are. You're one of the very few 1920 players. How many 1920 players are there right now, by the way? Something like 16, 20, 20, something like this? I don't know how many
It,
there are.
it it's in the teens.
It's in the teens.
It's like 14 or 15. I'm not even I stopped counting after Shiny Rayquaza because it didn't even matter at the point.
Okay. Yeah, for real. Yeah. So one of very few select people when it comes to experience with the game, not just in game count, but across every hero, right? Because to hit 1920, you have to play every single hero to MS, not just play one hero a lot. And so I've invited whoever wanted to debate, and they could come debate on stream. Seems like a lot of people who had disagreements with me either didn't actually disagree with me or didn't want to debate on stream, where they could be held accountable for whatever they say, it seems, and whoever could comment on it. But TammonIsHot was lovely enough to say that he would be willing to, and so we're going to try and be not too harsh on him today, hoping that maybe we can do more debates like this in the future whenever the community has disagreements on something. That said, welcome, welcome. Is there any main disagreement you have with anything I've said that you want to start off with, and maybe we can go from there?
My disagreement is like your huge reliance on just straight numbers to prove like actual Smash Heroes facts. Like I get the idea that you're using numbers to prove like oh how much percentage of what like how much damage is done to heroes the players before they actually die. Like I I understand what you're coming from on this, but I don't actually agree with like your use of the numbers in general.
Okay, so I'm gonna give an example, and then maybe we can wrap it from that example towards what you just said.
All right.
So let's say there's a game where there's let's say a clock, okay? Since the clock is one of the examples we were talking about with the change to damage rocket. Given in that game that to a reasonable extent, the rocket was never used to like spike someone, it was never used to edgeguard someone, it was only ever used reasonably for damage, right? Now obviously it's impossible to only use the ability for damage because everything will do some amount of knockback and there's like some very slight positioning differences and all this fancy tech that no one really has a grasp on because I don't think it's possible to have a really strong grasp on stuff like this. Um, because it's just such a vague idea. But do you think that we could reasonably accurately estimate how significant that rocket was used in that game?
Well, I mean, uh, I think you'd have to take multiple values because with Cluck especially, you've got your rockets, yeah. But I think you'd have to calculate like the cluster block stuff as well, the ultimate damage as well, and all that.
Yeah, like we could include that, but just looking at how significant the rocket was, right, for that game, we'd only need the rocket values, right? Because if let's say the rocket is like some 50% significance, like some arbitrary number, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
really matter what other combination of significance we have with the other abilities. Because we're not talking about those abilities, we're talking about the rocket specifically for this instance, right?
yeah.
Okay. So it seems like at least in one case scenario, it is, or it is, at least in some cases, it is possible to have a reasonable grasp on how an ability is used and its significance, right?
Yeah,
Just through the simple data we can get from the API, which is not necessarily all the data I'm talking about. When I say data, I'm talking all data, right?
yeah,
And so at the very least, just with the easy to grab data, right, the low hanging fruit data, we can already make some estimations, which would arguably be better than a lot of good players, right? No matter how good you are, if you're playing clock, a lot of players just don't count how often they're hitting shots and stuff like this, and how much damage
yeah.
it's dealing, right?
Like I'm sure people can have estimations over time, but when I
Yeah,
play clock, I don't keep count of how much I hit my rockets. I just kind of shoot and hope for the best.
exactly. And we showed that with the Conrad example, right? Do you think that was a reasonably accurate example of showing how some people don't necessarily have an exact grasp on the significance of each of their abilities in any given game?
I haven't seen any of your other debates.
It wasn't a debate. I just said at the beginning of the stream here. So I can go over it again real quick. So essentially what happened is we wanted to see if it is possible that through having further data on a game, you would allow you to have a better understanding of how significant each ability was in a game. So given a game, if you had more information, such as how many, like your accuracy with each ability, how often you hit them, stuff like this, you could have a better understanding, more accurate understanding of how good each of those abilities were for you that game. So what we did is we played a game, and then I got him to estimate how significant each ability was. So he played on Spooter, and he estimated that his dash was about 60%, his ult was about 15%, and that his web was about 25%. And then he's basically asked a few questions, and it seems like he agreed that those numbers are like a decent rough estimation, but that if he watched back the game, he could be a lot more precise. He could give a lot more accurate numbers there. Do you agree that this is a thing where, um, through further examination or further analysis, whether it's through API stats or it's through just watching the video and counting whatever, or any form of data, do you agree that we could have more accurate and a more precise idea, or more, I keep using the word accurate, but I think it's a very strong word here, more accurate idea of how significant um, an ability's usage is on a hero?
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Okay, and do you agree that to properly commentate or to give the best possible feedback, because the idea is we want to give the best feedback on these balance changes, right?
Yeah.
And so do you agree that to give the best possible feedback, we want to have the best understanding of not just the game as a whole, but also specifically these, like the each individual point. So for example, for the Cluck Rocket, to be able to commentate on the Cluck Rocket, it's not just having general player experience, but it's having general player experience plus having the best possible overall understanding of how the rocket works to be able to estimate how much of a change it is.
I mean, I agree that like you can calculate significance in games, but like I don't feel like abilities should be buffed based on how significant they are actually in a game. I feel like abilities should just be buffed for like the sake of buffing the hero and getting like the number getting like that hero equal on a tier list with like other heroes. Like I don't believe that like specific abilities should be buffed based on their significance or like their use. I just believe that things should be buffed in general to get it up there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think those go in hand in hand. So to buff a hero, you're buffing their abilities for the most part, or you're buffing some aspect of them.
Yeah.
One example of that is to buff an ability. So by buffing an ability, right? Because let's say you have a Cluck who is like playing melee Cluck for some reason. They never fucking right click, all right? They never touch the rocket once, okay, ever. Do you think that for that player, buffing rocket will actually buff their Cluck?
No, because they're not
Okay,
even pressing right click.
exactly. Now if they press right click once per game, do you think it's still buffing them, but do you think it's as much as if they use it a lot or only use it?
I mean, a clock that uses the rocket a lot more is gonna do much more damage over time than a clock that doesn't use a rocket much.
Okay, so it seems like if we have an ability that is very significant for a hero, and we buff that ability, it'll be a more significant buff to that hero compared to if we buffed an ability that's like lesser user, has less significance for that hero.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Okay. So do you have another point you want to talk about, or
Mm, Not really. I mean, it's just that like I really felt like you were just using numbers to try and like solve Smash Heroes in general. Like I memed on a little bit by saying you were
a lot of
solving the
people did,
lore of
yeah.
Smash Heroes by using
Yeah.
numbers, but uh, really the thing that I disagree with is just I mean, I already mentioned this, but I just disagree with your use of numbers. I feel like if we're gonna buff Smash Heroes in general, we should I mean, I see that numbers could be used for like just general usefulness. But really, the backbone of an update comes from the actual player, like that play the game themselves, and like especially the competitive community, because those are the guys that actually understand the game to its core, and those are the guys that are actually dedicated to spend probably way too much time playing the game. But
Right, so you did agree earlier that to give the best possible feedback, we want to have the best possible understanding, right?
yeah,
And do you think that we can use data to increase at least some people's understanding of the heroes? I would agree. I would say I'd go further than that, and I would say I think we can, by some significant margin, increase everybody's understanding, at least some, obviously different degrees, right, of the abilities. But do you think that at least some people could have a better understanding, given they had access to more information, more data?
yeah, like if people had more data, they'd understand like really what abilities get used more
Yeah.
rather than I feel like there's significance though.
Well, if something gets used more, then it has more significance, right? Like if usually, so like if you have two abilities and one of them uses them 99% of the game, the other one has used it 1% of the game. It's very clear that the first one has more significance for that hero, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it seems like uh, what's happening is if a hero has more significance in any one ability by buffing the ability, it's a larger buff than potentially some people might think. And so that's my main point. It's that when you read, right? For example, when you read increase Cluck's rocket damage from 6 to 7, not everybody is going to have the same understanding of how significant that change is. Because there's a difference between a small buff and a big buff. And it's very difficult to just estimate that through feeling. Because although you can estimate it through feeling, right? And I think that we should be using player experience. A lot of people have been making the claim that I'm trying to ignore player experience. I'm not. I think that player experience is very useful here, but I think that we can take it a step further and not only use player experience, but also use data, which is another tool that we have to have even better understanding on the significance of ability. So we have a better understanding of how significant of a buff or how negligible of a buff something is.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
No.
So do you disagree with any of the main points that I had, which is just that I think that more information could be beneficial here? And that we probably should actually look at this more information if it is beneficial, considering we only get a buff we only get, sorry, a balance patch once in a while, and we want to make it as balanced as possible.
Well, I mean, I see the potential in numbers, but I'm not gonna let go of my point that actual player experience, it would be much more beneficial than just looking at numbers in API.
Yeah, but you could do both. You're not forced to only look at the data, right? Just like
Yeah,
you're not forced to only look at player experience. Why not do both? Wouldn't both just be inherently better for the most part?
yeah, I could see that. I could see both of them working together to a certain extent.
And that's my point. We should just use both. We should not just like do whatever we want based on feeling. And we should instead not ignore player experience, but also include whatever we can to get the highest quality feedback possible, to have the best understanding of how much a change is before we give feedback so we can give the best feedback possible so that we can end up, right? Because ideally, by giving the better feedback, we'll end up with a better balance patch, which means we'll end up with a more balanced game at the end, right? And I think that's everybody's goal. It's everybody, for the most part, I think, everybody who's acting in good faith wants a more balanced game in the end. Do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, everyone wants a more balanced game, but
Yeah.
the truth is that when it comes to a game like Smash Heroes, there's always going to be a top tier hero and there's always going to be a
Yeah, and I
Tin
don't
Man.
doubt that. I don't doubt that. Well, not necessarily. Next update might be something that's not demand. It might be a different hero. We don't know, right?
Yeah,
But there
yeah,
always will be some. It'll never be a perfect balance. But ideally, we want to get as close as possible to the perfect balance, right?
yeah,
And so, shouldn't we do as much as we can, take as much advantage of this opportunity that we can to really get just a better balance patch out of it, to squeeze a better balance patch out of this opportunity here?
yeah, that's true. But when it comes to Smash Heroes, honestly, it needs more than a balance patch. I like to save it at this
Yeah, but
point for
we
to
haven't
really
been
make it
given the
better.
opportunity for that, right? We just kind
Yeah,
of we don't have that card, so we can't deal it. We kind of just have to play with whatever we have. And right now, we've just been given a potential bounce patch, and so since this is all we have to play with, we kind of have to play with that as best we can.
yeah. Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah. So it seems like you don't really disagree with anything I've said, unless you want to repeat something that I maybe missed, or if you have something else you want to bring up.
I mean, coming into this debate, like, I feel like I misunderstood some of your points for a little bit,
A lot of people did, yeah.
because I feel like, because I agree that data can be used to actually, like, be useful in an update, but I still feel like that actual player experience would be more significant, but, data values are still something that, like, hey, it'd be pretty nice to have, but,
And it's not just like data on like how like accuracy of hitting shots and right because obviously if we say like on average a clock no matter what subset here but if we're looking at comp games or not comp games or overall every game let's just and regardless of your subset as an example let's say a clock is hitting 20 shots with your rocket a game right I don't care what the numbers any amount of rockets by increasing the damage that's a direct increase of damage that those 20 shots are going to do. And so
yeah,
at the very least, damage-wise, you can estimate how much of a buff that is. So it already gives us a more precise and more accurate estimation of how significant that ability is when it's being used by that hero.
yeah, that's true.
It doesn't tell us everything in the world, but it at least tells us more information that I think is a significant amount more. I don't think that it's like a small, like 0.01% more information. I think that it's at the very least, like probably bare minimum, like 3, 4, 5%, which I think is enough to potentially sway some people's opinions on something.
Yeah, but I think you do have to take like a Hyplex's reply especially into account though, because there are a lot of top players that will just go around and farm nons all day and Q dodge, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, like I said, you can choose whatever subset. I'm not here to determine whatever subset of data you want to look at. You can just split and cut the data however you want, reasonably, right? So like if you
Yeah,
want to balance around only tournament play, then you only take data from tournament play, and that's on you. I'm not the one that's going to judge whatever subset of data you want to use. Um,
yeah,
but by inherently saying that, by saying like, oh, I only care about tournament play, you can just use tournament play data. That's not a disagreement with using tournament data or to use any data, right? That's just saying
yeah.
you want a specific subset, and I don't think that's a disagreement with anything I've said.
I think the biggest thing when it comes to me personally though, is when I first read your like long reply to the threat to Stolly's thing. I almost took your response as like slightly aggressive because I feel like a bit confrontational because like I get now that you're literally just trying to ask a question, but I mean kind of the reason that I popped off on you a little bit is because I read your post as like being kind of aggressive in a way.
I mean, it's always going to sound aggressive because I'm challenging potentially a lot of people are saying, right? Like everybody who commented on the thread, to some extent, is going to have a different estimation of how significant each ability is, right? Not everybody, like some people might think that that's a minor buff to Cluck. Some people might think it's a super major buff to Cluck, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's where potentially a lot of disagreement between some people are. Some people might, who think that it's a really big buff to Cluck, might say it's too much. And then some people who think that's just a small buff to Cluck will be like, oh, it's fine, it's just a small buff. And I think that Cluck needs a small buff right now. And so I think that it's unnecessarily creating a lot of stuff like this, and that I can understand how my forum post may have come off as, or as my forum post reply may have came off as confrontational, but inherently it's going to come off at least a little bit as confrontational, or it's at least going to come off on the confrontational side of things, purely because I'm commentating on other people's thoughts for a balance patch. And obviously, there's a lot of emotion here, a lot of ego here, because there's a lot of people who have been playing this game for many hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, I can agree with that one there. Yeah, the amount of time that I've sunk into this game is already way less than a lot of other people, and I'm already starting to feel like I've wasted my time. So I can't imagine some of these guys with, especially people like you who are, 1920s, people with tens of thousands of games played, that if you feel like you almost feel like changing the game, it's like it's changing what you love, right? If you're playing this game all day every day, then it's and you play it because you love it. It's not just changing some game that doesn't matter. You're absurdly invested. So inherently, when someone's commenting on something that you're very invested in, if what they say isn't exactly agreeing with everything that you say in entirety, super strongly, then there's going to be some amount of confrontation there, because people are going to feel like you're not disagreeing with their points, but that you're disagreeing with like their love for the game to some extent.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been playing Smash Heroes for like a very long time, since like late 20 or like mid late fall of 2016, let's just say that. I mean, I've lived through like two different metas. I lived through, well, I'm saying that like I'm some dead ghost now. What the hell am I saying? But my time in Smash Heroes has been spent through two different metas. It was from basically the start of the game to about early, yeah, early 2018 was the Skullfire meta. And I mean, it's still a good hero nowadays. So not gonna throw that away, but and from mid early 2018 to nowadays, it's the Void Crawler meta. And I mean, I'm not willing to say that like taking Void Crawler away from top tier would it almost hurt me emotionally, but like mm, it's strange. I don't know how to describe it, but like you know what, when you live through something for a very long time, you kind of do want it to stay the same. Like that's just how I am. I'm not a fan of change, I guess you could say that. Like,
Yeah. A lot of people aren't, right? If they really love a game, some change to them might mean potentially loving the game less.
I mean, I'm already slipping away from Smashers at this point. I mean, I made a some post in the old Smashers community Discord, which I mean Anchor owns nowadays, but I'm not even sure if it's a thing anymore. And if it is, I already know that it's dead. But I made some post saying that like I kind of wanted to like leave Smashers because I felt like I had wasted my time, and I kind of wanted to pursue real life things.
Hmm.
But like for some reason, this whole Hypixel balance patch thing has gotten me probably to an unhealthy level of investment into Smash Heroes again. So I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
started playing it again, but I've been checking the forums a lot. So
Well, if you want to play someday, I'd love to play against your pug again. I'm no longer playing Kara, so maybe you'll have a better shot this time, alright, eh?
and my pug is way too rusty to get a hop
It's
on and
fine.
just
It's fine.
clap someone nowadays.
Yeah.
I was
Alright.
never the number one pug already, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I really appreciate the talk. It seems like I think we can both agree that maybe we can agree on my take and that there's no actual disagreement here. Um,
I
at least concerning like what I said, like the points I made, not necessarily with like how it came off, but just the points I made. And then I'm gonna ask you if you do have enough time, it'd be amazing if you could go and actually try and guess the answers to the questions that I ask in one of my follow-up posts. Because I think that'd be very interesting to see not only how people are compared to the actual data, so how close what people think is to what the actual data shows, but also the difference between players amongst themselves. So as we can see, Shark Loot estimated the first number to be at 30%, whereas Hypeflex said 60%. Obviously, that's a very big margin. 30 to 60% is a very large jump. And we've got what 50 to like 10%, something like this, like 70% to different values, 40%, 25%. There's very big jumps here. Now, obviously, Shark Loop probably isn't the best. Personally, I think we can all agree that Shark Loop maybe doesn't have the most personal experience here. But it'd be awesome if you could take the time to, at the very least, and in your own estimations, so we can see how close you are to the other top players, I guess, in terms of player experience.
Sure.
All right, well, very thank you for coming. You can head out whenever you want. I think we're going to continue the stream a little bit, just answer some questions in chat before I finish. And yeah, if anybody ever wants to watch this in the future, I'm probably going to put it on my channel. Um,
Yeah. It's
looking
fine. I don't care.
looking at chat here, we've got a few messages from HFKD, who is I don't think anybody would call him a top player by any means, but I think people would consider him a player at the very least.
Yeah.
He says, let's see here. What about alts? How do you determine the significance of an ultimate? The same way we determine the significance of any ability. So any ability should be able to be split into its different components, right? So any ability that does damage will have some sort of damage component. Every ability that has, where like you're hitting multiple attacks, for example, so like scatter shot on hood, that has that component because if someone is on 0, you have to hit them again to kill them. And so scatter shot doesn't have to deal with that, but if someone's on 1 HP and you shield alt, I think it'll still leave them on 0. So as that component of does it have to deal with, is it like all one hits or multiple hits, etc. It has some knockback component. It has a component, and within the knockback component, there's how significant that knockback is, like its strength and also the direction and stuff like this, and how easy it is to control that knockback and how predictable it is, stuff like this. And there's all sorts of components like this. And at the very least, we can try and use player experience and where possible use data to more accurately determine the overall significance of an ultimate by combining the significance of these individual factors. We should be transparent about your Apple joins in here. Famous the Bridge player. Also famous for playing in that one Stratus tourney, I think. You should be transparent about your magic Minecraft numbers or another form plus people know exactly what you are doing. I think I've already been transparent with a lot of my data, Apple, in my Boost Exposed video, but I already did mention that I will be posting all of the actual results data-wise to all the questions I asked in my forum post in a few days. So I think I posted it like 2 days ago now. I'll probably wait like 2 or 3 more days and then I'll post it. I just really want people to send in, to lock in, to commit to their answers. Because it seems like a lot of people are refusing to commit. And then as soon as I show something, they commit to that thing that I like after I already show my answer. And so I want people to commit beforehand now so that they can't backtrack. Or if they do, they're going to have to like completely walk back in front of everybody on what they said. Um, Instead of just kind of like pretending that that was never really their answer, right? So I want to force people to commit because a lot of people are refusing to commit because they're scared for some reason. And so I'm doing that, but I already did mention that I'm going to be posting all the results in some time. And that's just using data from the API. So if you want data from not API or not from database or not from something else, then you can get that data yourself. I'm not going to be the one to go analyze dozens of tourney games if for data that you want. I have the data that I want for the most part, and maybe some data that some other people might want. If your data just so happens to be the data that I don't have, then either you can go get it or you can decide to just not use it, and that's on you. That's it. I think this was a very productive stream. Nice and short. I don't want to keep it too long, so I'm going to post as a YouTube video on my channel. And if you want to see more debates in the future, two things you can do. One, comment down in the description down below. You can go ahead and mention what topic you want me to talk about, who you want me to talk to about it. And then also, if you want, you can join and watch and talk live, chat in the chat with everyone live during any of these debates, and you can participate in the chat. Anyways, that's been the debate. I'll see you guys.